My name is Lee Papa, and I'm an ordinary woman from America whose life took an extraordinary turn on December 28, 2024. That was the day I died, or at least came so close to it that I crossed into a realm beyond this world. What I saw there changed me forever, stripping away my fears, my attachments, and my old way of living. Today, on March 17, 2025, after months of reflection and research into what I experienced, I'm ready to share my story. It's not just about death. It's about love, purpose, and the unseen threads that tie us to this life. Before that day, my life was a whirlwind of chaos, drama, and a quiet, nagging unhappiness I didn't even recognize. I grew up in a gentle Catholic household, what a friend once dubbed cafeteria Catholicism, where you could pick and choose what suited you from the faith. My father had studied to become a priest before settling into family life, but it was my mother who ushered us to church on Sundays. I can still hear the bells ringing through our small town in upstate New York, feel the cool wood of the pews beneath me as a child. Yet even then, something felt off. The idea that there was only one path to God didn't sit right with me, and that seed of doubt planted a lifelong curiosity, a hunger to explore the unknown. By 2024, I was in my late 30s, married to a man I'd once adored, and mother to our son, Alex, born in 2022. He was my light, a bundle of joy with big, curious eyes, and a laugh that could melt any worry. But our family wasn't picture perfect. We'd moved from Los Angeles to Las Vegas a couple of years earlier, chasing affordability after my mother's fall changed everything. She'd lived on the East Coast in the same house for 40 years until one day she tripped, lying helpless on the floor for 45 minutes before a neighbor found her. My husband Tom and I, both freelance entrepreneurs with flexible schedules, decided she'd live with us. Vegas, with its no state income tax and lower cost of living, seemed like the answer. That move was bittersweet. I remember the long drive across the Nevada desert, the sun blazing overhead, my mother in the back seat with a distant look in her eyes. She missed her old life, her garden, her neighbors, and no matter how hard I tried, buying her a plush armchair, cooking her favorite chicken pot pie, she seemed lost in her own world. I'd catch her staring out the window at the barren Vegas landscape, and it broke my heart a little more each time. Then came the accident. Just months after we settled in, Tom was driving my beloved BMW 325i convertible, a car I'd scrimped and saved for, when a truck barreled through an intersection and smashed into him. He survived, but the man I'd known, the one who'd dance with me in the kitchen and chase Alex around the yard, was gone. Chronic pain took over his body and his spirit. He'd wince with every step, snap at me over small things, and retreat into silence. We were thrust into a lawsuit with the truck driver's insurance, a grueling process that dragged on for months, filling our days with lawyers, depositions, and arguments. I felt like I had to hold everything together: Tom's health, my mother's quiet despair, and Alex's innocence. I was crumbling, though I didn't see it. My back ached constantly, a dull throb from stress and sleepless nights. I caught colds that lingered for weeks, my immune system battered by exhaustion. Once, half joking, I muttered to myself, "Don't come near me or I'll get sick," as if I could will illness into existence. I was seeking happiness outside myself, through work, through others' approval, blind to the emptiness gnawing at my core. I'd always been a seeker, dabbling in new age ideas, reading about crystals and energy healing, but it was surface level, a distraction from the real work I needed to do within. December 28th, 2024, started like any other day in that chaotic stretch of my life. Tom had just left for a 10-day silent meditation retreat in Colorado, something he'd signed up for hoping it would ease his pain and bring him back to himself. Before he left, he looked at me with those worried hazel eyes and said, "Lee, I don't want to leave you like this. You're sick, and I won't be able to check in." I'd been battling a respiratory bug, dry coughs racking my chest, breaths coming short, but I waved him off. "I'm fine, Tom. Go. I'll see a doctor and get antibiotics." He hesitated, then nodded, and we said goodbye over the phone as he boarded his flight. I did go to the doctor that day, a quick visit to a walk-in clinic near our house. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as a tired-looking physician scribbled a prescription for amoxicillin. I picked it up at the pharmacy, promising myself I'd rest, but I didn't. Instead, I threw myself into a frenzy of tasks, installing a new security system for the house, making sure Alex had his lunch, checking on my mother, who sat in her armchair with the TV droning softly. Alex toddled over to me at one point, his chubby hands tugging at my jeans, his eyes asking a silent question. "Mommy, are you okay?" I ruffled his hair and forced a smile. My mother, though, just watched me, her gaze heavy with something unspoken. By that afternoon, I was running on fumes. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a glass of water or a proper meal. Maybe a stale granola bar the day before. My body screamed for rest, but my mind wouldn't let me stop. I lay on my bed, the room spinning slightly, my breath shallow and ragged. I knew something was wrong, but I pushed it down, telling myself I'd power through like always. Then, as the winter light faded outside, I felt a shift, a heaviness settling over me, my chest tightening like a vice. Panic flickered, but I was too weak to fight it. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed my friend Sarah, Alex's godmother. My voice was a whisper. "Sarah, please come take care of Alex. I'm not okay." She didn't ask questions, just said, "I'm on my way." Minutes later, she lived only a block away. I heard her car pull up, the front door creak open, her soft voice calling to Alex. When the door clicked shut behind them, relief washed over me. My son was safe. That's when I let go. It wasn't dramatic. No tunnel vision or cinematic fade to black. It was gentle, like a leaf drifting from a tree. I felt my soul lift out of my body, a weightless sensation that carried me upward. There was no pain, no fear, just a quiet release. Then, a blinding white light enveloped me, bright as a lightning bolt yet warm and welcoming. I was no longer Lee Papa, the tired mother and wife. I was a field of light, merging into a greater expanse of radiance. Bliss flooded me, a sweetness I'd never known, as if every burden I'd carried dissolved into nothingness. I thought, this is it. This is home. In that luminous space, I had no body, no sense of time or boundary, just pure, unbounded joy. It was as if I'd stepped off the wildest roller coaster of my life and landed in peace. I wanted to shout, "Let's keep going!" But then, from the distance, though distance felt meaningless there, two beings of light approached me. One carried a masculine energy, tall and broad, with a deep, resonant presence. The other was feminine, soft and nurturing, her essence like a gentle breeze. They didn't speak with mouths, but their words echoed in my mind. Lee, it's not your time yet, but you have free will. You can choose to stay or return. Stay? Why would I go back? Here, there was no pain, no lawsuits, no sleepless nights, just this exquisite freedom. But they held me there, their presence calm and steady, and said, "Before you decide, there's something you need to understand." What followed wasn't a typical life review with flashing images of my past. I call it a relationship review, a visceral flood of emotions tied to the people who mattered most. First came Tom. Our marriage had frayed, stretched thin by his accident and our struggles, but in that moment, I felt an overwhelming love for him. Not the romantic spark of our early days, but a profound gratitude for the journey we'd shared. I saw the man who'd held my hand through labor, who'd cried with me when Alex was born, and I knew that despite everything, he'd shaped me in ways I could never repay. Then my mother washed over me. I felt her sacrifices, every meal she'd cooked, every quiet hug she'd given, and my heart swelled with warmth. She'd been my rock, even in her silence, and I realized how much I'd taken her for granted. But when Alex came, I broke. There were no tears in that place. I had no eyes to cry with, but my soul wept. The love for my 2-year-old son was soft, pure, like sunlight on a spring morning. I remembered his tiny hands gripping my finger, the way he'd giggle when I tickled his belly, the milky scent of his hair when I kissed him goodnight. It was beyond words, beyond anything I'd ever felt. The being spoke again. "If you leave now, Alex won't fulfill his destiny. He lost his mother in a past life, and that pain will echo again." Their words jolted me. A memory flashed, not from the light, but from after I returned. Weeks later, I was teaching Alex to make pancakes for Thanksgiving breakfast. He reached, too close to the stove, burned his hand, and wailed. I rubbed lavender oil on it, held him tight, whispering, "Mommy's here. I've got you." But he sobbed, "I want my other mom." Confused, I said, "I'm right here, sweetie." He shook his head, insistent. "No, my other mom." I'd brushed it off as toddler nonsense then, but now I understood. He was reaching for a mother from another life. The beings didn't stop there. They let me feel what Alex would endure if I left. A pain so sharp it was like shards of glass ripping through my soul. It was the raw, unbearable anguish of a child abandoned. A grief no one should ever know, least of all my little boy. I couldn't stand it. Gasping in that light-filled void, I turned to them and said, "I'll go back. I'll be his mother until he doesn't need me anymore. Then, when I choose, I want to come back here." They didn't nod or smile. There were no faces to read, but I felt their agreement, a silent pact sealed in the ether. Instantly, I was yanked back. It was like falling through a tunnel of wind, my essence slamming into my body with a jolt. I opened my eyes in my Vegas bedroom, the digital clock glowing 6:47 p.m. on December 29th, 2024. My chest heaved, my hands trembling, but I was alive, and everything was different. When I came to, the world shimmered. The hinges on my bedroom door glinted like silver. The doorknob seemed to pulse with life. The faded curtains danced in colors I'd never noticed. I sat up, staring in awe, feeling like I'd stepped into a movie where every frame was painted with magic. It wasn't just my eyes. My soul saw beauty in the mundane, a residue of that radiant place clinging to me like dew. I didn't know how long I sat there, minutes or hours, lost in wonder. The next morning, though, reality hit. I woke up to find half my face paralyzed. Bell's palsy, a temporary condition from the stress and illness that had pushed me to the edge. I looked in the mirror, one side of my mouth drooping, and laughed. Not out of despair, but because I was still high on that bliss, untethered from worry. I drove Alex to daycare, my face lopsided, then took myself to the ER. The staff rushed me in, thinking it was a stroke, their voices sharp with urgency. I stayed calm, almost amused. "It's not a stroke," I told them. The doctor warned, "This might be permanent." I shrugged. "It won't be." And later proved it with acupuncture and Reiki, regaining most of my face within 6 weeks. When Tom returned from Colorado, I couldn't wait to tell him. We sat on our worn leather couch, facing each other, the high, Vegas sun slanting through the blinds. I poured out every detail, the light, the beings, the choice, and watched his expression. He didn't interrupt, just listened, but I heard his thoughts as clearly as if he'd spoken. Her mind conjured this. It's not real. It was the first time I'd sensed someone's unspoken words, a gift from the other side. When I finished, I said, "You don't believe me, do you?" He paused, then replied, "It's not that I don't believe you. The mind's a powerful thing." I smiled. "That's okay. I don't need you to believe me. This was mine, and it's the truest thing I've ever known." He nodded, but the rift between us widened. Months later, we separated, though we've stayed friends, bound by Alex and a shared history. I didn't shout my story from the rooftops. I told a few close friends, but their reactions, pity, skepticism, made me retreat. I could feel their thoughts too. She's lost it. So I turned inward, sharing only with those on a spiritual path like mine. Sarah, my sister who studied metaphysics, a friend named Brenda, who'd lost her own mother and found solace in the unseen. Brenda's spiritual teacher in Houston called me back after I left a shaky voicemail saying, "That's a textbook near-death experience, Lee. That residue you feel, it'll fade in 2 weeks." She was right. The overwhelming bliss softened, but its echo stayed with me. That experience didn't just bring me back, it transformed me. I stopped fearing death, knowing what awaited beyond this life. Light, love, freedom. The beings taught me 3 truths. There's no attachment on the other side, only pure love. Death isn't an end, just a transition. And we choose our lives, our parents, our pain, to learn and grow. Life isn't meant to be a fairy tale. It's a tapestry of light and shadow, a classroom for the soul. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't learned through ease, but through the need to forgive. I began living differently. Before, I'd dive into every drama, swept up in the hurricane of emotions, Tom's pain, my mother's silence, the lawsuit's grind. Now, I step back, an observer. When my Uber didn't show up one morning, I didn't fume. I noticed the stress rising and asked, "Where's this coming from?" I let go of attachment to things, to approval, to outcomes. My old self would have clung to that BMW like a trophy. Now, I'd give it away without a second thought. Nothing material comes with us, and that's liberating. The beings didn't just send me back. They gave me a mission. I felt it in my bones. I was to be a light worker, a guide for others. It started small. Guided by an inner voice, not loud, but a quiet knowing. I rented 2 rooms in a Vegas office building in early 2025. I turned them into a spiritual center, a place for meditation, healing, connection. Volunteers came, people I'd never met, but who felt drawn to help. And by November 11, 2025, it had grown to 6,000 square feet, opening with a ceremony that felt like a miracle. I wrote The Temple of All Knowledge years earlier in 2014, but in 2024 I released a 10-year anniversary edition, my voice wiser, my words carrying a decade of spiritual growth. I speak now, at corporate events about mindfulness, at small gatherings about the other side. I tell people their loved ones who've passed are more than okay. They're thriving in a place of love and wisdom. My mother died in 2023 before my NDE, and I still talk to her. Sometimes I feel her, a warm presence, her dry humor intact. Sometimes I just speak to the air, trusting she hears me. I've seen things since. Mother Mary in a meditation, so real I fell to my knees sobbing. An angel in a dream, her light, undeniable. My guides whisper lessons, like the day in my Vegas garden when I was watering plants, and a voice said, "Stop counting, feel the water." I'm still learning, still growing.